Television highlights of the news of yesteryear. It's 1916, and here with wife is Republican candidate for president Charles Evans Hughes. There's war in Europe, and one-time New York governor and justice of Supreme Court is campaigning against Woodrow Wilson, seeking second term in White House. All goes well with Hughes till he slights California's Governor Hiram Johnson. In November balloting, California goes to Wilson by 4,000 votes, thus depriving Hughes of important electoral votes and at last minute costing him election. Wilson is returned to the White House and Hughes goes back to private life as lawyer. Here in 1920, he wins important case for striking United Mine Workers. But when Warren Harding becomes president in 1921, Charles Evans Hughes returns to public life as Secretary of State. As such, in 1922, he's key figure at Washington Conference, along with Lord Balfour of England, left, and Briand of France. Here's pen used by Hughes in signing of historic documents. Conference produces important 9-power treaty, which Hughes signs for United States. His signature heads list of important names. And here's peace-promoting 4-power pact. After months and months of conferences and meetings, Hughes leaves Washington's Pan American Building, pleased with the progress he's made for worldwide accord. Then in 1923, Hughes meets with fellow cabinet members Hoover and Mellon, and Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, Stanley Baldwin, and others, to arrange payment program for England's war debt to the United States. Mellon becomes ambassador, Hoover a president. Here's a good look at Calvin Coolidge's cabinet that same year, 1923. Mellon, Hoover, and Hughes will each someday hold higher office. Delegates of foreign powers are well pleased with handsome and gracious United States Secretary of State. Hughes is not only credit to himself, but to nation and world as he conducts important post-war conferences. But then in 1925, he resigns. He's 62 and wants rest. But 2 years later, he comes back from busy session at The Hague, having been elected permanent member of court. On Morrow Castle in 1928, he goes to Havana, Cuba, to speak at peace conference, saying,
Gentlemen of the American delegation, we are met here this morning under the happiest auspices for the purpose, first, of unfurling the flag of the United States, which we trust will be a symbol of our desire freely to cooperate with the republics of this hemisphere.
This is high point of career of Charles Evans Hughes as strong voice of international goodwill. But there are bigger things in store for this once defeated presidential candidate. In 1930, President Herbert Hoover makes him Chief Justice Charles Evans Hughes of the United States Supreme Court. And then on 4th of March 1933, he opens a new era for the nation he has served for many years, giving oath of office to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. From 1930 to 1941, he guarded law of nation. And then at the age of 79, he resigned. An immortal American, Charles Evans Hughes.
It's 1920, and one-time General Smedley Butler has been appointed Philadelphia Chief of Police. And according to the colorful Butler, fighting crime is the same as fighting war. Gas grenades are put to test as Butler's men in blue practice Army methods of attack. Smedley would smoke out any hoodlums hiding here. Little later, Butler orders gigantic searchlight to be erected on tower overlooking Philadelphia. It's going to help cops on beat in City of Brotherly Love as soon as it's put into operation. Of no use at all in daytime, it becomes far-reaching arm of the law after dark. Light of 200 million candle power searches city streets for hoodlums. Here's General Butler himself saying that his newest weapon in war against underworld is working. Butler did a good job in Philadelphia before resigning to go back into service.
Here's Dr. Charles Proteus Steinmetz in 1922, just a year before his death. Famed genius of electricity is showing equally well-known wizard of Menlo Park, Thomas Alva Edison, equipment for one of his latest experiments in electronics. Yes, here's rare look at two of the greatest men of science, Thomas Alva Edison and Charles Proteus Steinmetz.
Here's Molla Mallory in 1922, back from unsuccessful quest of tennis crown in Europe. But Mrs. Mallory hasn't too much to be unhappy about, for in 1922, she won U.S. championship for third straight time. Then, along came little girl named Helen Wills.
Here's Carl Spaatz in the early 1920s when the someday general of America's huge Air Force was a mere major in the flying wing of the Army. It's 1928, and in the fabulous borough of Brooklyn, New York, a moonshiner still explodes, wrecks one house and breaks windows in the schoolhouse across the street. 30 children are hurt by flying glass as force of blast showers classrooms with jagged pieces of broken window panes. Building which housed still is a total loss, and so are the still and its spirited contents. They say that almost anything can happen in Brooklyn, and Brooklynites do things with a bang. Well, that's the way it was in Brooklyn back in 1928.
In Washington, D.C., it's 1922, as chiefs of dozen Pueblo tribes come to nation's capital to see Big White Chief Warren Harding. They're here to protest to President against bill which would rob them of lands they've occupied since 1858. Dressed in odd mixture of American and Indian clothing, they come to Capitol building to discuss their pressing problem, and while some pose for cameramen, these two chiefs talk it over.
It's 4th of February, 1929, as mechanic Oscar Grubb and flyer Frank Hawks prepare to leave Los Angeles in plane to fly to New York City in what they hope will be record time. Notice Hawks' stylish flying suit. Is he going to a football game? It's farewell and happy landings, Frank Hawks. And off they go into the wild blue yonder. And at this stage of flight, there's no way of telling just where that yonder will be. New York is almost 3,000 miles away. But 18 hours and 22 minutes later, Hawks and Grubb bring plane to runway of Roosevelt Field, Long Island. And they've beaten old coast-to-coast record by 37 minutes. But it wasn't easy. They had to battle headwinds, dense clouds, and even rain, sleet, and snow. But they made it.
Girls from Syracuse. Here in the early 1920s, coeds at Syracuse University hold their annual pageant. Greek is the word for it. Dressed for refreshment time, most students look alike. Do these look anything like college girls today? Do these look anything like girls today? Do you have a photo of yourself in the sports uniform of then? Or is that what you tore out of the family album and burned? Well, things got better by 1930. Here at Hunter College, students are freed from confining bloomers and floppy midi blouses. And it's a treat for the boys, too. What a difference a bloomer makes. Now girl students have to work for exercise. They don't get it just walking around inside layers of heavy clothing. Next came shorts, and to be very brief, the bikini.
It's 1921, and at Cleveland, Ohio, here's Jake Schaefer Jr. and Roger Conti, champion at 26, showing the skill of their elders. Young Conti looks like old hand, and youthful Jake shows same stuff with which his famous father beat Willie Hoppy, king of the billiard champions. This is how Jake made winning run of 306. Sensational billiards for an expert, and that's just what young Jake Schaefer was back in 1921. At Waltham, Massachusetts, they're up the creek in highly entertaining canoe races. In tandem race, paddle has two blades, and contestants look like a lovely bunch of Eskimos. In race of war canoes, paddles fly and so do boats, as crews cut up the water at the finish line. Look, Ma, no paddle at all. But these canoe experts can make a race of it with all hands overboard.